The emergency beacon pierced the cosmic silence like a dying scream, its digital pulse carrying pure terror across the infinite black. Captain Elara's hands trembled violently against the communication console as another devastating explosion rocked the Starweaver, sending sparks cascading through the bridge like deadly fireworks. The peaceful Ventari science vessel, once humanity's symbol of hope and discovery, was now becoming their tomb. Mayday. Mayday, says Captain Alara of the Galactic Research Coalition. Her voice shattered with raw desperation, each word a plea torn from her very soul. You're under attack by Razak death squads. They're butchering my crew like animals. The transmission crackled with static as another plasma blast nearly severed their communications array. We have children aboard, innocent younglings, who've never seen violence. Please, if anyone can hear this, help us. Through the reinforced viewport, Alara watched the nightmare unfold with the helpless clarity of the doomed. 7 Razak warships surrounded her vessel like vultures, circling carrion. These weren't just military craft, they were floating monuments to brutality. Their hulls painted the color of dried blood and decorated with the skeletal remains of 1,000 conquered worlds. The Razak had earned their terrifying reputation. Through centuries of methodical slaughter, they didn't just defeat their enemies, they erased them from existence. You know what's truly horrifying about the Razak? They actually enjoyed their work. While most species killed out of necessity or survival, the Razak had turned genocide into an art form. Their ships bore macabre trophy skulls from dozens of species welded directly into their armor plating. Entire civilizations had learned to whisper their name in fear. The largest Razak destroyer, a monstrous vessel called Bone Harvester, moved closer with predatory patience. Alara could actually see the grotesque figurehead mounted on its prow, a twisted sculpture made from the fused skeletons of Ventari children from their last encounter with her people. The sight made her stomach lurch with revulsion and terror. Her science officer, Dr. Marcus Webb, crawled across the deck toward her, leaving a trail of crimson behind him. Plasma fire had seared through his left side, and his breathing came in ragged gasps. The children... Are they? Safe in the emergency pods, Alara whispered, though she knew it was only a temporary reprieve. The Razak were notorious for hunting down escape pods like a sick game. They particularly enjoyed targeting the young ones. Marcus tried to smile, but blood trickled from the corner of his mouth. At least we tried to show them the stars were beautiful. His eyes glazed over as consciousness slipped away. These were scholars, not soldiers. Brilliant minds who had dedicated their lives to unlocking the mysteries of the universe. The Ventari had evolved beyond warfare millennia ago, choosing the path of knowledge over conquest. They'd believed that intelligence and curiosity were humanity's greatest weapons. How tragically wrong they'd been. Another explosion closer this time sent Alara sprawling across the deck. Emergency lights bathed everything in hellish red as atmosphere leaked through dozens of hull breaches. The Starweaver's shields were failing. Her weapons had never existed, and her crew was dying around her. Through the chaos, she could hear the terrified cries of her people echoing through the corridors. The Razak were toying with them now, landing surgical strikes designed to maximize suffering while keeping the ship barely functional. They wanted the crew alive for what came next, the slow, methodical process of harvesting trophies. Alara had heard the stories whispered in spaceport cantinas. The Razak didn't just kill their victims. They kept them conscious during the collection process. She forced herself back to the communication console, her fingers dancing across controls slick with her own blood. This is Captain Alara. Our shields are down. They're preparing to board. If anyone receives this transmission, please remember us. Remember that we tried to bring light to the darkness. But wait, something strange was happening to her instruments. The long-range sensors were detecting massive energy signatures approaching from the edge of the system.
Multiple contacts, moving fast.
Lara's heart hammered against her ribs as she adjusted the sensor array. What she saw defied belief. 15 ships had just dropped out of hyperspace, and their energy readings were completely off the charts. These weren't the elegant curves of Ventari vessels, or even the brutal angles of Razak warships. These ships looked like they'd been forged from pure, violent, sleek predators. Built for one purpose only, the lead vessel transmitted a simple identifier that made her Blood Freeze, U.S. Thunderstrike. Human registry. "Oh no," she whispered. The galaxy's newest species, the ones everyone spoke about in hushed, terrified tones. Humans came from a world so hostile that simply surviving childhood, they're created beings of unimaginable resilience and fury. They were called Deathworlders, creatures evolved in an environment so brutal it would kill most species within hours. But here's the thing nobody expected. Humans had a peculiar obsession with protecting the innocent. Throughout their brief but explosive entrance onto the galactic stage, they developed a reputation for intervening in conflicts where civilians were threatened. They fought with a savage intensity that made even the Rozak nervous. The human fleet spread into attack formation with mechanical precision, each ship moving to cover another in a complex dance of warfare. Ilara realized with growing amazement that they weren't just responding to her distress call. They were already calculating firing solutions while simultaneously positioning themselves to shield her dying vessel from further harm. The Thunderstrike opened a communication channel, and a voice filled with cold authority echoed through her bridge. "Attention, Rozak Fleet. This is Admiral Morrison of the Terran Defense Force. You have attacked civilians under galactic protection law. Surrender immediately or face complete annihilation." The response was immediate and chilling. Admiral Jake Morrison stood like a monument to controlled fury on the bridge of the UES Thunderstrike, his battle-scarred face bathed in the crimson glow of combat alerts. Every line etched into his weathered features told a story of violence survived and innocence protected. The bridge around him hummed with deadly efficiency as his crew moved through pre-battle routines with the fluid grace of apex predators who had tasted blood and found it wanting. "Sir, priority distress signal intercepted on emergency frequencies," reported Commander Lisa Hayes, her fingers flying across the holographic tactical display like a pianist performing a symphony of destruction. The data streams cascaded before her in brilliant blue patterned ship signatures, weapon readings, and most importantly, life signs. Civilian research vessel under active assault by Rozak death squads. 43 souls aboard, including younglings. The words hit Jake Morrison like a physical blow. His knuckles turned bone white as he gripped the command rail, the metal groaning under the pressure of his barely contained rage. The Rozak had just signed their own death warrant. They'd made the one mistake that guaranteed their complete annihilation. They'd touched innocence. And not just any innocence, but scientists, explorers, the kind of people who looked up at the stars and saw wonder instead of conquest. Opportunities? You want to know what really set humans apart from every other species in the galaxy? Most civilizations either evolved as predators or prey. Humans were the only species that had been both, simultaneously, for their entire evolutionary history. They understood what it meant to be hunted, which made them fiercely protective of the vulnerable. But they also understood how to hunt, which made them absolutely terrifying when someone threatened their protected. "Time to intercept, Commander?" His voice carried the weight of 100 battles. Each one fought not for glory or territory, but for the simple principle that the strong should shield the weak, that children should sleep safely, that scholars should pursue knowledge without fearing for their lives. 14 minutes at maximum combat burn, Admiral Hayes replied, her own voice tight with controlled anger. She'd been with Morrison for 6 years, through the Proxima Massacre, the Siege of New Geneva, the infamous Battle of Kepler's Gate. She'd seen what humans could do when their protective instincts were triggered. Signaled the entire fleet. All ships to battle stations. Full combat protocols. Morrison's orders cracked across the bridge like whip strikes. Around him 200 crew members moved with the synchronized precision of a machine built for war. Weapon systems came online. With electronic growls, shield generators hummed to full power. Fighter bays opened like the mouths of hungry beasts. But here's the thing that made human military doctrine so uniquely terrifying. They didn't just prepare for battle. They prepared to win while protecting others. Every tactical decision was filtered through one simple question. How do we save the innocent while destroying the threat? Hayes Morrison turned toward his second-in-command, and she actually took a step back from the cold fire burning in his eyes. "Open a channel to those butchers. Tell them they have exactly 14 minutes to power down their weapons, release their hostages, and prepare to surrender. And if they refuse, sir," Hayes asked, though she already knew the answer. She'd seen that expression before, right before the Rozak's sister fleet had been reduced to glowing debris clouds over Arcturus Prime. Admiral Morrison smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. It was the kind of smile that had made warlords across 12 star systems wake up screaming in the middle of the night. It was the smile of a predator who had evolved on a world where everything tried to kill you from the moment you were born. It was the smile of someone who had learned that sometimes mercy was cruelty and true compassion required absolute violence. Then they'll discover exactly why the entire galaxy refers to us as Deathworlders. The human war fleet began its transformation from exploration vessels to instruments of annihilation. 15 ships that had been cruising peacefully through hyperspace suddenly became something else entirely. Their sleek hulls seemed to grow more predatory. Their weapon ports opened like eyes awakening from slumber. And their formation shifted from a loose convoy to a precisely coordinated attack pattern. The UES. Vengeance moved into flanking position, her captain already calculating firing solutions. The Retribution and Justice formed the hammer that would crush any Rozak ship attempting to escape. The smaller destroyers Freedom and Liberty took point positions, ready to screen the larger vessels while simultaneously protecting the civilian ship, caught in the crossfire. But the crown jewel of this mechanical orchestra of destruction was Morrison's flagship itself. The Thunderstrike had been built specifically for situations like this, rescuing civilians from overwhelming enemy forces. Armor could withstand direct hits from capital ship weapons. Her shields were designed to protect other vessels, not just herself and her weapons. Well, her weapons had been crafted by beings who understood that sometimes you needed to kill monsters to protect innocents. "Admiral, we're receiving telemetry from the civilian vessel," reported Lieutenant Commander Torres from the sensor station. "The Starweaver is badly damaged, hull breaches on multiple decks. Their shields are failing, and they have no weapon systems." His voice tightened with barely controlled fury. "Sir, there are children aboard that ship." Until the muscles stood out like steel cables. Children younglings who should be learning about the wonders of the universe. It's not cowering in terror while monsters closed in for the kill. The Rozak had just guaranteed themselves a level of retaliation that would become legendary. "Time to contact? 12 minutes, Admiral. Signal all ships. Prepare for combat engagement." Rules of engagement are simple. Any Rozak vessel that fires on civilians dies first. Any ship that attempts to flee dies second. Any ship that surrenders immediately gets to live long enough to face trial. Morrison's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than any shout. "And if they've harmed even one hair on those children's heads, ... He didn't finish the sentence. Every person on that bridge had served with Morrison long enough to know what he was capable of when innocents were threatened. They'd seen entire pirate fleets reduced to expanding clouds of superheated plasma when they'd made the mistake of targeting civilian transports. The human fleet continued its approach, engines burning white-hot as they pushed their vessels beyond normal safety limits. But here's what the Rozak didn't understand about humans. They didn't just fight harder when protecting others. They fought smarter. Every tactical database in the fleet was analyzing Rozak ship designs, identifying weak points, calculating optimal firing patterns. Admiral Hayes called out, her voice cutting through the bridge's controlled chaos. "Long-range sensors are detecting the Rozak response. They're not retreating, sir." Mazak's smile widened, becoming something that would give nightmares. "Two hardened space pirates? Good, I was hoping they'd be that stupid." The countdown continued as two forces prepared for collision, one driven by bloodlust and cruelty, the other by something far more dangerous. Righteous fury combined with superior firepower, tactical brilliance. 11 minutes and counting. Until the Rozak learned why humans were the most feared species in known space. Rozak War Chief Gorvak was practically purring with sadistic pleasure. as he listened to the alien captain's desperate pleas echoing through his flagship's communication system. The terror in her voice was like fine wine to his twisted senses, cracking her composure. Every desperate sob fed the darkness that had consumed his soul centuries ago. He leaned back in his command throne, grotesque chair crafted from the fused bones of his previous victims, and savored the moment before the real fun would begin. The Bone Harvesters. Bridge was a monument to organized brutality. Skulls from dozens of conquered species lined the walls like macabre decorations, their empty eye sockets seeming to watch the proceedings with silent accusation. Gorvak's crew moved about their duties with the casual efficiency of beings who had turned murder into routine. They'd done this dance 1,000 times before. Round, terrorize, board, harvest, move on. It was as natural to them as breathing. War Chief. His communications officer hissed through razor-sharp teeth, "The female is begging for her younglings again. Should we respond?" Gorvak's laugh was like grinding metal scraping against stone. "Let her beg. Fear makes the bone marrow sweeter." He was already mentally calculating how many new trophies this raid would yield. But the Vintari had such delicate skull structures. They'd make excellent additions to his personal collection, but then his sensor technician started screaming. "War Chief, multiple contacts detected. Massive power signatures approaching at incredible velocity." The shrill panic in his subordinate's voice cut through Gorvak's sadistic reverie like a plasma blade. In all his years of conquest, he'd never heard genuine terror in a Razak warrior's voice. They were the apex predators of known space. What could possibly frighten them? "How many contacts?" Gorvak snarled, his own unease beginning to creep into his voice like poison through his veins. "Some pathetic coalition patrol boats thinking they can play hero? 15 ships, War Chief, but these energy readings..." The sensor, text claws, were actually trembling as he manipulated his instruments. "Sir, these aren't normal military vessels. Every component, every system, they're all designed for one purpose only. Pure, concentrated killing. Want to know what's truly terrifying? It's not the monster you can see coming. It's the moment when the monster realizes there's something bigger and hungrier lurking in the shadows behind it." Before Gorvak could process this information, every screen aboard his flagship suddenly blazed to life with the same image. A human face filled the displays, not the soft, pampered visage Gorvak had expected from the galaxy's newest species, but something else entirely. This was a face carved by violence and tempered by loss. Scars crisscrossed the man's features, like a roadmap of battles survived and enemies defeated. But it was the eyes that made Gorvak's blood freeze in his veins. Those eyes had seen things that would break lesser beings, and they promised a level of retribution that made even Razak. Atrocities seemed merciful. "Attention Razak fleet." The human's voice cut through space itself with surgical precision. "This is Admiral Morrison of the Terran Defense Force. You are currently engaged in attacking civilian non-combatants under Galactic protection law. You have one opportunity to power down your weapons, release your hostages, and surrender for judicial processing. This offer will not be repeated." The bridge fell silent except for the steady hum of life support systems. Gorvak's crew-hardened killers who had never known defeat stared at the screens with expressions of growing dread. There was something in the human's tone, something that spoke of absolute certainty and unlimited capacity for violence that made their primitive survival instincts scream warnings, but Gorvak hadn't built his reputation by backing down from challenges. He threw back his massive head and laughed a sound like breaking bones and shattered dreams. Humans. These soft-skinned newcomers think they can threaten the mighty Razak horde. His voice carried across the bridge with manic glee. "We are 12 heavy destroyer-class warships. We have conquered 100 worlds. We've turned entire star systems into graveyards." The human admiral's response came immediately. The temperature on the bridge seemed to drop by 10 degrees, 11 minutes, and 30 seconds. That's when the tactical displays started showing what was approaching them, and Gorvak felt his first genuine moment of fear in 3 decades of slaughter. The human ships weren't just warships. They were floating expressions of barely controlled violence. Each vessel moved with predatory grace that defied their massive size, their hulls swept back in aggressive lines that seemed to cut through space itself. These weren't exploration craft hastily converted for combat. These were purpose-built instruments of annihilation, or Chief, his tactical officer whispered. Their weapon signatures are ... unprecedented. I've never seen energy readings like this. Meanwhile, aboard the dying Starweaver, Captain Alara pressed her bleeding hands against the viewport as she watched 15 sleek warships materialize from hyperspace like avenging angels. The contrast was striking where Razak vessels were crude. Angular things designed to intimidate through brute ugliness, these human ships possessed a terrible beauty. They moved like living predators, all flowing lines and barely contained lethality. Captain, who are those ships? Dr. Webb gasped from his position on the deck, plasma burn still smoking across his chest. I've never seen anything like them. Lara's voice came out as a whisper filled with equal parts hope and terror. Humans, the Deathworlders answered. Our call. The human fleet spread into what could only be described as a hunting formation. Unlike the chaotic positioning of most military forces, these ships moved with the coordinated precision of a pack that had hunted together for years. Each vessel took a position that maximized their collective firepower, while simultaneously providing overlapping fields of protection for the damaged civilian ship. But here's what made the sight truly chilling. The humans weren't just positioning for attack. They were positioning to ensure that not a single Razak ship could escape once the shooting started. This wasn't going to be a battle. It was going to be an execution. War Chief, Gorvak's sensor technician, called out, his voice climbing toward. Hysteria. They're not just approaching, they're hurting us. Every movement they make is calculated to eliminate our escape routes. Gorvak stared at the tactical display, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. In 30 years of conquest, he'd never encountered tactics like this. The humans were thinking several moves ahead, anticipating every possible Razak response, and countering it before it could be implemented. 10 minutes. Admiral Morrison's voice echoed across every Razak ship simultaneously. Somehow, having penetrated their secured communication networks without triggering a single alarm, the countdown had begun, and with each passing second, the noose grew tighter around the Razak fleet. But the most terrifying realization was yet to come. The humans weren't just superior tactically and technologically. They were fighting for something the Razak couldn't understand, the protection of innocence they'd never met from a species they barely knew, simply because it was the right thing to do. And that kind of moral certainty, backed by overwhelming firepower, was about to teach the Razak why the galaxy whispered the word human in tones of respectful terror. Captain Alara floated in the sterile white sanctuary of her ship's medical bay, her body still trembling from the aftershocks of terror and adrenaline. The contrast was almost impossible to process just minutes ago. She'd been preparing to die alongside her crew, and now she was watching the most feared warriors in the galaxy work with hands so gentle as they could have been tending to newborn flowers. The human medics moved through her wounded crew like angels of mercy, their movements precise yet compassionate. These were the same beings who had just reduced 12 Razak destroyers to glowing space debris in 7 minutes of surgical destruction. Yet here they were, using advanced medical technology to seal plasma burns, repair shattered bones, and restore hope to beings they'd never met before today. Easy there, Doc, one of the human medics said softly to Dr. Webb, who was trying to sit up despite his severe injuries. That plasma burn went deeper than you think. Let us handle the heavy lifting for a while. The medic's voice carried the easy confidence of someone who had seen worse wounds and brought people back from the brink of death countless times. The medical bay doors slid open with a soft hiss. Admiral Morrison entered. His massive frame seemed to fill the entire doorway, yet somehow he didn't feel threatening. Up close, Ilara could see details that the chaos of battle had hidden. The scars crisscrossing his weathered face weren't the random marks of violence, they were precise, purposeful injuries. These were wounds taken while protecting others, not inflicting harm. Captain Alara. Morrison's voice was surprisingly gentle for someone who had just commanded the complete annihilation of an enemy fleet. I'm Admiral Morrison. How are your people holding up? Live Alara managed, her voice catching with overwhelming Gratitude and profound confusion. We're alive because of you and your crew. She paused, studying his face with the intense curiosity of a scientist encountering an impossible phenomenon. But I don't understand something, Admiral. The entire galaxy speaks of humans in hushed whispers. They say you're monsters from a Deathworld beings evolved from pure violence and endless conflict. Morrison moved closer and carefully knelt. Beside her medical pod, his movements deliberately slow and non-threatening, despite the obvious power coiled in his frame. This close, she could see the intelligence burning in his eyes, not the cold calculation of a predator, but the warm determination of a protector who had seen too much suffering and decided to do something about it. "We are from a death world," Captain Morrison said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute truth. "Every single sunrise of our evolutionary history meant fighting just to see sunset. Our planet tried to kill us with weather that could freeze or cook us in hours. Predators that made the Rozak look like house pets. Diseases that could wipe out entire populations. Natural disasters that regularly reset civilization back to zero." Alara's large, luminous eyes reflected his scarred features as she hung on. Every word. Here was a mystery that had puzzled xenobiologists across the galaxy. How had such a hostile environment produced beings, capable of both ultimate destruction and profound compassion? "But you know what all that violence and struggle taught us?" Morrison continued, his expression softening like a father explaining the universe to his child. "It taught us that strength without purpose is just destruction. That the strong have an absolute responsibility to shield the weak. That knowledge and peaceful exploration, the things your people dedicate their lives to, are treasures worth dying for. Want to know the real secret about humans? Every other species in the galaxy had evolved as either predators or prey. Humans were the only species that had been both simultaneously for millions of years.
Oh.
They understood what it felt like to be hunted, which made them fiercely protective. But they also understood how to hunt, which made them absolutely lethal. When that protection was needed, Morrison stood slowly, his expression carrying the gentle authority of someone who had made peace with violence as a tool for good. Your distress call reached people who remember exactly what it feels like to be helpless. To watch loved ones suffer while being powerless to help. We just happen to have developed the firepower and tactical expertise to even the odds when innocent people need us. Through the medical bay's viewport, Lara could see the human fleet maintaining protective formation around her damaged vessel. These weren't conquerors savoring their victory. They were guardians ensuring safe passage home. The Thunderstrike had positioned itself between the Starweaver and the debris field that had once been the Rozak fleet.
Ass.
Its massive bulk serving as both shield and statement. "The children," Alara whispered, suddenly remembering the younglings hidden in the emergency pods. "Are they?" Safe and sound, Morrison smiled, and the expression transformed his entire face. "My crew's already retrieved all the escape pods. The kids are currently in our recreation deck, being entertained by some of our off-duty personnel. Apparently, human card tricks are a universal hit with youngsters." As if summoned by their conversation, the medical bay doors opened again, and the sound of children's laughter echoed through the corridors. Alara felt tears streaming down her face, not from pain or fear this time, but from overwhelming relief and gratitude. But here's what was already happening across the galaxy, in a phenomenon that would reshape interstellar politics forever. The rescue of the Starweaver was being broadcast on every major news network. It's transmitted through quantum communication arrays and discussed in the halls of power on 1,000 different worlds. The message was spreading like wildfire through civilized space, threaten innocence, harm the defenseless, prey upon the weak, and the Deathworlders would come. Not as conquerors seeking territory or glory, not as merchants demanding payment, but as guardians defending those who couldn't defend themselves. Asking nothing in return, except the knowledge that children could sleep safely among the stars, the Rozak Syndicate's response was immediate and telling. They issued a galaxy-wide statement, declaring civilian vessels off-limits to their raiding fleets. The Corvani pirates disbanded entirely rather than risk human intervention. 3 different warlords who had built empires on slavery and terror quietly began releasing their captives and seeking honest work. Admiral Morrison began moving toward the exit. But Alara's voice stopped him. "Admiral, why? Why risk your lives? For strangers?" He turned back, and for a moment she saw past the warrior to the man beneath. Someone who had made a choice long ago about what kind of universe he wanted to live in. "Because, Captain, there's nothing more dangerous in this universe than a human protecting someone they've decided is worth saving. And as far as we're concerned, anyone seeking knowledge, anyone protecting children, anyone trying to make the galaxy a little brighter, they're all worth saving." As the human fleet prepared to escort the Starweaver to the nearest safe port, the galaxy itself was learning a new truth. Humanity had officially announced their role in the cosmic community. And it wasn't as conquerors or traitors or diplomats. They were the guardians, the protectors, the ones who came when heroes were needed and none were available. And that was the most terrifying and hopeful development in galactic history. The end.